Here we go. I'd like to call the meeting of the Village of Riverwoods Board of Trustees to order, please. Stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Ford.
Present.
Trustee Clayton. Absent. Trustee Dickin.
Here.
Trustee Eastman.
Here.
Trustee Hollander.
Here.
Trustee Jamerson.
Here.
Trustee Smith.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First order of business is approval of the minutes of the Board of Trustees appropriations hearing of March 18. Do I have a motion for approval, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? Suggestions, additions, deletions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, those passed. Next is the Board of Trustees meeting on March 18th. Do I have a motion for approval, please?
So moved.
Is there a second, please? All in favor? Are there any questions, comments, edits? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Next on the list, Finance Director's report. We'll start with the approval of bills. Do I have a motion for the approval of bills?
So moved.
Is there a second, please? Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Dickin.
Aye.
Trustee Eastman.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Trustee Smith.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Director Vasquez, your report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few items for tonight's report. Audit field work took place the last 2 weeks. Auditors actually wrapped up field work a couple of days early, which is usually a very good sign. Based on the updates I've received from them so far, it seems we are still on track with our goal of presenting the audit findings to the board at the second meeting in May. We've been informed of an upcoming water rate increase from Northbrook, the village that we purchase our water from. I plan to bring the board a recommendation on our water rates to capture recent increases from Northbrook. And finally, at our last board meeting, there was a question on if the recent invoice to M.E. Bach for HVAC work should be capitalized. I discussed this with our auditors, and they agreed that it would be an appropriate item to capitalize. So we will do a journal entry to recode that invoice. And that's all I have for tonight.
Are there any questions for Trustee Hollander, please?
Yeah, has it been the policy of the board that when we get a water increase, we just increase it what our increase is, or do we add anything on top of that
I don't believe
to
there's
cover
any.
other costs?
Yeah, I don't believe there's any policy associated with it. I think there's an evaluation, and then we come to the board with recommendations for approval for an increase.
So we don't remember, no one remembers whether we've just done the increase or added something to it? I don't remember personally, and I know we've done it 3-4 times. but-
May I ask Director Vasquez to answer, please?
Most recently, in fall of '23, when the rates were increased, Trustee Clayton brought forth like several scenarios, and ultimately it was a 10% rate increase, which not only captured increases from Northbrook, but was also meant to raise additional funds for capital needs or anticipated capital needs.
Trustee Jamerson, did you have a comment, question?
I was just going to say, in the past, prior to this recent one, the board just bumped it up the amount of the increase from Northbrook in most cases, in my memory. So we haven't had that many increases going back. It's only been in the last like 4 years where they've been increasing it more frequently.
Are there any other comments or questions for our director? Thank you. Treasurer is not with us this evening. Director of Community Services, Director Witt, please.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, couple of items for tonight. Maybe let's start with Federal Life, which is probably the most prominent thing that people are seeing occurring as they're driving down Deerfield Road. Demolition of the building structure commenced on March 18th. As of today, I would guesstimate about 2/3 of the superstructure is down. Once that debris is removed, they will start work on removing the foundations and footings. That portion of the job will take at least another 2 weeks thereafter. So I think we're about a month and a half, plus or minus, away from being able to scrape all the materials off the site. Tree removal has been completed on that site. I don't have an update on the reservoir, but I do know that they were working on removal there. That one is a little more difficult because of the amount of material that is underground. For Saunders Road, the tree removal portion of the reconstruction project is complete. However, we were notified today by ComEd that they may need to remove additional trees within the right-of-way in order to move their utility lines out of the way of the reconstruction of the road. So any active tree removal that is seen is not something that is being done by the village. That is being done by ComEd. Calls can come into community services, but we will direct those right back at ComEd. We're going to be asking them for a plan so that we can understand the extent of the removal work before they really get moving with it. The reconstruction project is still on track for June letting. Finalizing the agreement amounts for the easements, two of those, which are, and those numbers are actually coming up in front of the board a little later this evening. Continuing with trees, staff had an extremely busy week this week with regard to the hazardous tree program. We sent out 190 letters today plus to the residents for removal and pruning of over 420 hazardous trees. Which those letters require corrective work to be completed or scheduled to be completed no later than June 20th. And then lastly, an update on the open burning ordinance. Again, another great project by staff, and I really have to credit everybody, but particularly village clerk as well as Dana in preparing not only the mailings for the tree removal, but also for the postcards with regard to open burning ordinance. Postcards were mailed out this week to all residents indicating that permits are now required for all burning of landscape waste, bonfires, or prescribed burns. An open burning permit was created and is currently posted on the village website for residents to download and turn in. The form includes all the regulations related to open burning. We've discussed with several residents so far the new regulations, and they were openly acceptable to those. They were really concerned about what this new ordinance was doing for them. We are currently processing the first application for a permit. Ironically, it's being denied because based on the size of the property, there is no place on the property that meets the criteria of being 50 feet away and outside of the required zoning yards. So that's an unfortunate thing, but it was bound to happen somewhere with some of the shapes of the properties. With each permit being issued, we've also created or are creating aerial view maps of each property, which will indicate exactly the 50-foot setback from the structures, as well as what the zoning yard setbacks are. And then it has a colorized portion which indicates to the residents the exact areas that they are permitted to burn within. Those maps and copies of the permits are being turned over to both the fire district as well as the police department. And I understand that Chief Dano has made access available to every police officer within their squad car electronically, both the map and the permit itself. So in the event that they're called out, it will help with enforcement. Enforcement is going to be handled with complaint calls being directed to the police department, which will notify village staff of the complaint. If village staff is readily available, we will be the first responder. If not, or if we have off hours or weekend hour situations, a police officer will respond to those complaints. We've established a grace period through April 15th being offered to help residents become a little more aware of the new requirements. After that date, citations may be issued for lack of compliance or in the case of repeat offenders that just don't want to abide by the regulations. And that's what I have tonight.
Are there any questions for our director? Trustee Eastman, please.
I just wanted to tell Director Witt that I appreciate the thought that's gone into the burn ordinance execution, because I think that, that level of care is going to give residents the assurance, particularly the ones that were concerned about it, that, we're trying to balance everyone's interests and that there's a well thought out process that, we're going to apply, and it's not just arbitrary. So I appreciate that work.
I would have to say, just as without pinning down any particular property in the area along Sherry, one of the residents that was in that area actually came in and met with Mayor Ford and myself, and was actually very receptive to understanding what the requirements are and committed to abiding by them. So hopefully, as the word spreads and neighbors see other people doing it, I think it'll get in tow.
That's good. I heard that. That's great. I'm glad that, that was a receptive conversation, and that's how I think those things should go.
Trustee Hollander, please.
Is that map available to everyone? I checked the building permit and I didn't see it attached to it. I mean, the burn permit is so that everybody can sort of see where in their property they're able to burn.
Okay. So we're creating those maps as applications come in.
Okay.
I've also expressed to one resident who had concern over the burning ordinance. She heard earlier this week that, hey, we have a new ordinance. We need to get a permit for this. I said, yes, you don't need a permit for that. Then she says, well, my fire pit's been here for 30 years. And I said, well, but I don't know where it is. And I said, it may need to get moved. So she told me that, well, we don't do open burning. We just have recreational fires where we burn leaves. And I said, well, that's open burning and that needs a permit. So I told her, I said, it takes us time to put those maps together. They just aren't, all prepared for every property. So as the application comes in, we will create that, which I have one on my computer right now, and we will attach that to the permit, and then it goes again, fire district as well as police department, so that everybody understands where they can do this safely.
Thank you.
Trustee Dickon, please.
Just a quick comment. I didn't realize that postcards were going out, but there is a quick link that has been created for the permit application. It's riverwoods.gov/burn permit. Really easy to remember.
I believe Dana has taken care of that, yeah?
I did it with her yesterday, so
Oh, yes, okay.
just
All
wanting
right.
to make sure that everyone is aware that there is a
Okay.
quick link, but it wasn't included on the postcard, so I didn't know that it was going out. I wish it would have been.
Sorry, we could have,
Oh, one more thing in the postcard. I actually saw the graphics. I saw the fire, pretty graphics. I'm concerned that it might get mixed up with promotional mail. And I think just generally for notices, for serious stuff that's coming from the village, we want to stay serious with just little cards and text. I think it has a optics of something that's not promotional and doesn't get tossed right away. Just my sense.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for our director? Okay, thank you. Moving on, consultants report, our attorney's report first, please.
I think I would just supplement a little bit about Federal Life. I had a conversation with Chuck Gleason from Lake County earlier this week. We also had a sort of a technical meeting with engineers, Christopher Burke, which is doing the engineering for Deerfield Road this morning. The county now, because of delays in acquiring easements from about 3 properties, which they think will end up going to court, has pushed back the date in which they would let contracts for the work, and I think they said September 2026. So that means tree work would start in the fall of 2026, and then the road work might start in the spring of spring of 2027. So I think that's
A little different.
about a year later than what we thought. Did I get that mostly correct? I was just giving the new timeline for the letting of the contract for by the county for the widening of Deerfield Road. To September 2026 is what they said.
they indicated it would be September 26 with construction starting somewhere within 2027.
Okay.
That is correct.
We just really heard this kind of confirmed this morning, but I had an inkling of it from Mr. Gleason. I also followed up on the status of federal funds. and what the situation in Washington might mean with the allocation that IDOT gets for some of these programs. The funds that the county was going to reimburse the village for the work that we perform on the Federal Life parcel is coming out of local funds, not out of federal funds. They had already appropriated in their approval $1.5 million. It may go over that number, but Chuck said that the county was committed to it, that even if the project is delayed a year because of condemnation or even longer, that they would reassess priorities. They would divert other of their local funds from other projects to get the Deerfield Road project done one way or another. It may take, a few extra years. But right now, IDOT is saying everything is copacetic. They've not gotten any instruction to do anything differently other than to keep proceeding. So the only reason for the delay currently is just the effort at getting the easements. They have to have all the easements in place before they can begin the work. So that gives us a little more time to prepare for removal of trees and things like that along Deerfield Road. It gives us a little more time to prepare a plan to deal with that. So I think that's on Federal Life, probably the main point. And that also, we had approved a number of easements and conveyances. The board had asked me to go back and just check with the county on the status of financing. My recommendations, we go ahead and complete executing the easements, get them over to the county, and continue with the projects that we have under our belts anyway. We're not really turning back at this point on what we're doing. Looking at the board, everyone's agreeing. Okay, two other quick things. We went through a lot of effort to prepare the affordable housing ordinance, which is basically the means by which we try to get to improvements in affordable housing in the village. We have an affordable housing plan. I wanted to briefly just mention the difference between the plan and the ordinance. The plan is a goal-setting device. It's aspirational. The ordinance is really the nuts and bolts of how we might try and achieve it, the goals set forth in the plan. The original plan is from 2005. We updated it in 2020. We're supposed to update it now more regularly under some changes to the state law. And we're supposed to file a current update before the middle of June this year. We have undertaken an update of the plan. The main reasons we have to update the plan is that we're required to show parcels that are potentially developable for affordable housing in the village. What we showed in 2005 no longer is applicable. What we discussed in 2020 has to be changed. So primarily the updating is to correct and point towards what the possibilities are today in 2025. So we will have a draft of the plan to discuss at the board meeting in April, the next board meeting. And then we have to have a hearing here at the board level, which we can schedule in May. And then assuming the board passes the update to the plan, we'll file it with the Illinois Housing Development Agency, which is where you file these. And the second thing is that I've been mentioning before, I've been collecting a number of suggested updates to the personnel manual. After laboring through them earlier this week, I can tell you that they won't affect almost anything that we do in the village, and yet almost all of them are statutorily required in some way. We have to address changes in law, changes in notices. Just to give one example, the Human Rights Act has different language now regarding the use of prior convictions, if you know of prior convictions, in making employment decisions. So we have to import the language that the law now requires into the manual. So I have gotten assistance from counsel from our insurance carrier, which has traditionally helped us with this. They're quite expert in this, and they actually provide us with policies for us to mark up and modify and use. There's probably 6 or 7 substantive changes in the personnel manual. But again, I don't think any of them are going to really affect how we operate as a village, but we should update them. So we're working through that, and I don't know if that'll be ready by the next meeting, but I just wanted to give you a preview that it will be coming back before the board.
Are there any questions for council? Any comments? Okay, thank you. Moving on. Our engineers report, our annual MS4, and you're going to explain it. Carolyn Chow is from Gaywalt Hamilton and Associates, and will lead us through a presentation. There's a little switch. Yeah.
Okay.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so this is the MS4 report, which just stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. It is a required program from Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, which is intended to protect and remediate any water quality issues, especially within storm sewer systems. If you could, next slide, sorry. Okay, so a few examples of the things that we look at when we are out performing inspections in the village. Granted, much of the village has overland flow through ditch systems, but if there are pipes, what we're looking for are things like oil sheens, soap suds, any debris blockages, so like the top left image, that's leaves, leaf litter, twigs, things that prevent them from functioning properly, as well as any structural issues. So the bottom right-hand side is a photo of erosion. That's a very extreme example, but when we're looking at some of the stream bank stretches, those are things that we are looking for and that we indicate in our report. Next slide, please. In addition to those aspects, we are looking for any odors, colors, vegetation growth. Those aspects are always indicators of something is wrong with your water quality. So an odor, obviously, if something smells eggy, typically indicates sulfur. That's always an obvious one. Color of the water, if it's discolored to any degree. And then plant growth, so excessive algae growth is usually an indicator of excessive nutrients within the water, which isn't necessarily it's a negative thing, but it's not necessarily regulated by IEPA. It's just something that we note in our report. And then these inspections are performed in what's considered dry weather situations. So no precipitation within 72 hours is what we typically look for. If there is flow coming out of a pipe and we're performing a dry weather inspection, that usually indicates that there's something connected to the pipe that should not be. So that's why we choose to perform them in dry weather. Next slide. Here's a couple photos from this past summer. The one on the right is difficult to tell what you're looking at, but you're looking down at a pipe, and then the one on the left is of a basin within the village. So when we perform our inspections, we always log photos to go along with those, just to have visual record as well. Next slide, please. And then the last slide is a note about the permit itself. So the permit is intended to be renewed every 5 years. So by renewed, it just means that they update some of the language, usually add some aspects to the permit itself, some requirements. The permit was supposed to be renewed back in 2021 and has not yet been. So this is the current status, according to EPA's website, is that it was supposed to be renewed back in March of 2024, which has obviously come and gone. So once they do actually renew the permit, we will have to update the village's stormwater management program plan, which is really just an indication that the village fully intends to comply with those new requirements in the permit. So we'll keep you up to date. I know you're all on the edge of your seats about when they're going to renew that permit. So that's all I have. This is a presentation required by the permit itself for public education purposes. So if anybody has any questions, I can answer.
Are there any questions, comments? Trustee Jamerson, please.
So is this report accessible by us?
Yes, so the reports are actually not, technically an MS4 permit year goes from March to March or the end of February. The annual reports do not get submitted until the end of May. Why that is, I have no idea. They also call it year 22 because it's year 22 of the permit year, which does not coordinate with the actual calendar year. So the general year numbering is all very confusing. But once those reports from past years are all on our website, actually. So when they are done, we upload the new one as well.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, any comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving along, next order of business is a report from our Plan Commission. Chair Brightcoff, please.
Good evening. The only thing I have to report is that we're not meeting in the month of April, but hopefully we will meet in May if we have business.
Does anybody have any questions or? Thank you very much. And we have our chair for our Zoning Board of Appeals with us, Chair Grederer.
And to the contrary of what we thought at the last meeting, there will not be a ZBA meeting this month. However, there has been a request made for the ZBA to look at the sign ordinances for Colonial Courts and Shops of Riverwoods, because there's a lot of difference between them and it becomes quite difficult to enforce them because of the dichotomy between them. So I would like the permission of the board to have the ZBA in its guise as the sign committee or overlook both the ordinance for Colonial Courts and the ordinance for the Shops of Riverwoods and see if we can somehow make alterations or suggest to the board alterations that would bring them into some kind of compliance.
I think that sounds like a reasonable request. Trustee Jamerson, please.
Can I request that as long as you're going to look at those two places, you look at the whole sign ordinance for the entire village? Because we're not doing a very good job of, well, I shouldn't say that. There have been a lot of inconsistencies in how it's being enforced everywhere. So I think it would be a good idea if it wasn't putting too much on your plate for you to look at the whole sign ordinance at some point. Obviously, the two you mentioned are probably more important than everywhere else because that's where most of our signs are. But
well, and because most of them are next to each other and there's a difference between them, which makes it tough.
Right.
But we figure it will probably take us 2 meetings to go through everything and make some notes that we can bring to the board. So if we've got time to look at the whole thing, we'll look at the whole thing.
Yeah, I think it's more, what I'm more concerned about are the temporary signs that are being thrown up. The car wash signs or the
big paper signs in the windows of stores.
Yeah. So, thank you.
No, actually, I have to tell you that in the time that I've been doing this, we have become much more efficient in our enforcement. We have a way to go with enforcement, and it's not as great as it could be, but it sure as heck is better than it used to be.
Are there any other questions or comments for our chair? Thank you very much.
Sure. I can do this.
Okay, next order of business is our police report. Chief Dano.
Yes, the police activity from the beginning of the year is in the board packet, and I don't have anything else to share tonight.
Do we have any questions or comments for our chief? As always, thank you very much for your service. Next on the agenda is a report from our fire district. Chief Kruger is with us this evening.
Make sure this is on. It's on? Okay.
Yeah.
Good evening. So I just have a statement to read, and then I'll entertain some questions for the board from our referendum vote yesterday. So this is what I sent out to our members this morning and also our board of trustees. As of this morning, our fire district did not receive the voter approval needed to secure the funds needed for our future fire station project plan. Late arriving votes by mail have not been tallied as of this morning. It may take several days or probably next week to receive a final count of the votes. It's important to recognize that the process has provided us with valuable insights in the concerns and priorities of our community and our members. We have learned a great deal in this process in such a short period of time. Whether the vote officially is voted down or approved, we will continue to inform and involve our community in the future plans of our organization. Our administrative chief staff will be meeting with our Board of Trustees next week at our April Board of Trustees meeting to discuss the next steps moving forward, how we can learn from the feedback that we received, and more importantly, we are committed to moving forward, ensuring that we include the input of our community, all of our members, into the future of our fire district plans. We also recognize the importance of expanding our communication and providing additional information to our citizens that better address their needs and concerns. Our commitment to provide first-class public safety services to our community remains unwavering. We will continue to do everything in our means to meet the needs of our members and the people we serve. Together, we will continue to make a difference in our community. A couple of things, I talked with the mayor briefly this morning, but I can't tell you how grateful our district, our members are for the support from Riverwoods. It was great. You saw in the voter turnout. We did, I shouldn't say better than expected, but we knew it would be close, and we knew we were under the gun based upon when we just started this in December, and we didn't want to wait until April of next year. We gave it a shot. We had a lot of information. We hired a marketing firm. We held many community meetings. I don't know how many emails I've entertained from residents, and one good thing, because we were beating our heads this morning, none of us slept. Most of us never didn't get any sleep, but when we did hold meetings or we did get questions from the public, in particular, we had a meeting last Thursday. We knew there was probably 4 or 5 people that came to that meeting right off the bat that were totally against it and had questions. But when they left, they were a yes. And there was one individual that was an engineer, and he said, "I'll go back for you if you need to for Lake County, get the fire trucks to move on the Deerfield Road." But he was a definite no at first. But then when we actually explained the process and we had time with them, it was very rewarding. So we're going to send a survey out from our marketing firm to as many people as we can to get more feedback and to learn from this. We know there's a lot more to do. We think we can still be successful, but the plan is still moving forward. We're not giving up. We are moving forward. There will be a station there. If you haven't seen the votes, it was a total of 1,567 total votes. We missed it by 67 votes. And so 657 of those votes, 42% of the votes were all mail-in, and 60% of the mail-in votes, follow me here, were yes votes. So we're still kind of like, we said we got about 0.1 second on the clock. We have our best shooter, and we're hoping that maybe those late votes that people mailed in late might get us over the hump. But nevertheless, we're going to remain steadfast in our commitment to getting that station, and we are committed to that. So like I said, we're not giving up, and it's going to make us better if anything. I'll entertain any questions that anybody has.
Any comments or questions? Trustee Dicken, please.
Just a comment.
Yep.
In looking at the Lake County's website, it's my understanding that they're still counting the votes for the next 2 weeks.
Right. So there's the 4th, 10th, the 11th, and the 14th. Not that I'm paying attention, but those are the ones that the late mail one. So Friday at 5 o'clock, I will be on my phone looking at if anything got sent in.
Fingers crossed that you might still get those votes.
We're optimistic, but at least we're trying to look what we can do better, and we know that, like I said, we can't be more pleased and grateful for the board and the Village of Riverwoods, because the voter turnout was great. There's a lot of yeses too, it was helpful, but some areas that we didn't reach probably and didn't do a good enough job to educate those people, but we tried. So we're going to try even harder.
Are there any other questions for our chief?
Nope.
Well, good luck.
Thanks.
You never know. You never know.
We'll-
Hang in there.
We'll see you on Friday.
Yeah, really, really. Thank you. Information items, comments from the president. I think, I don't know if everybody saw the email. I was told that the trustees got an email from a resident. Okay, so if you have not read it, it did have to do with issues that might come up or that are, may come up tonight. Addressed yoga, addressed the use of the RRA, and talked a little bit about youth service. So I don't know if you want to take those into account as we move through our agenda. So I have nothing to add to that. Just wanted to draw your attention to that email. Visitors wishing to address the board on items not on the agenda. We have a lot of visitors with us this evening, and happy to see you. If you'd like to ask a question of the board, this is kind of a good time. No pressure. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the board this evening on items not on the agenda? Okay, moving forward then to new business. First item of new business is approval of an amendment to the liquor ordinance. I'll ask our village attorney to lead us through this, please.
The second whereas clause in the ordinance is unnecessary and should be deleted. Sorry about that. It just refers to a new liquor license class that's not being created. This was, I didn't even spot that until the other day. The genesis of this rewrite of this section is that we determined that there were a couple of places where the old language said the fingerprinting would be done by Lake County Sheriff. So that tells you how long ago this section had been written. So the police department asked that we take a look at it and update the section. There's a red line, which is awfully messy to follow afterwards, which shows, but from the time that this section was originally written, the types of business entities that exist have changed. We now have limited liability companies and so forth. So there aren't, I would say there's, again, no substantive change to what will happen. It's just that we updated the categories. We had the language more closely follow the state of Illinois liquor license application. Of course, we changed the reference from saying that the fingerprinting or anything like that would be done by the Lake County Sheriff's Office. We changed that. And we did one other thing, which is on page 43 of the ordinance, we suggested adding a new section, subsection D, to the existing section 329 of the Village Code to require that each local liquor licensee and his employees who serve alcohol go through the Bassett training program. We never had that as a requirement by ordinance before. Since we were rewriting the application material, it seemed like a good time to incorporate that. I think we could go with just a first reading tonight. I don't think this,
Okay.
I can bring back a corrected ordinance at the
Do
next.
we have a motion for first reading and a first reading?
I'll make a motion for first reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of first reading?
Wait,
No,
Say
no,
aye.
we're not waiving.
oh, we're not waiting. Okay.
No, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign. Okay, first reading complete, and we'll see the second reading and approval on another day. Next meeting, maybe. Okay, next on the agenda is a discussion and approval of a
Mayor?
proposed yoga program.
Mayor,
Oh, I'm sorry. Trustee Hollander?
you have a question on the rewrite. You wouldn't ask for a statement whether or not the license issued is an elected public official. Is that the elected public official within the Riverwoods community or anywhere? Because that's come up in a few other suburbs around here.
Highland Park.
I think it's anywhere.
Anywhere.
I think if the person is a public official, we will know when they apply for a liquor license.
Okay,
I think that's right. I'll check on that.
all right.
Are there any other questions? Any other comments? Okay, then we'll move on. Next item of business is a discussion and approval of a proposed yoga program. We had a proposal that at the March 4th meeting, and there was a memo, follow-up memo that we included in the packet this time, proposing how we might go about implementing the yoga program for the board's discussion. So I'm opening the floor for discussion of the yoga program. Trustee Dicken, would you like to take the lead on that?
Did you want to summarize it for the audience or?
Well, we could move forward with the discussion, unless you'd like to,
Okay, let's move forward with the discussion. So I am proposing that. Thank you. Was it 8 straight? Both great. Yes. Okay. So just a brief background on this. When COVID hit in 2020, we had opened our family's tennis court to community yoga, and it resulted in dozens of people showing up several times per week. At some point, there were over 40 people showing up at 6:30 in the morning on my parking lot just to do community yoga. And I felt that it was a great opportunity for us to network, make friends, meet the neighbors, because unlike other municipalities, we don't really have a community center. We don't have a formal gathering space that has regular fitness, outdoor fitness programs. And what ends up happening is many of our residents go outside of Riverwoods to attend these programs. I personally happen to go to Glencoe at 6 a.m. every Friday morning of the summer just to do yoga on the beach. So I'm proposing that we do a pilot program within the village and use it as an opportunity to start building a better sense of our community. This is meant to be more than just a fitness program. This is meant to be an opportunity where we get together, we shake hands, we say hello, we start conversations, and we make this a better place to be. I'm proposing a 10-week series running from June through August as a bright and early, typically 7 a.m. type of yoga, which would be accessible to all residents. I know, Mayor, you had mentioned that you felt that it would be better to make sure that all attendees are village residents. In my personal experience, all the programs that I have attended don't discriminate. They're happy to accept anyone, but I think we should only advertise this to local residents. I'm not expecting a turnout of 150 people, but I think this would be a great opportunity to, if somebody from Bannockburn shows up, I think we should welcome them. This should not involve any participation from the police force and village staff, because the village hall will be open and the restrooms will not be accessible. All the equipment should be provided by the attendees, who will be required to sign a waiver, and the instructor will be a certified yoga instructor, hopefully somebody from the community or a nearby studio. Comments, feedback?
In the memo that we provided, it said that similarly, it might operate just as the community garden does, with a resident organizer. And the village helps the community garden just in terms of collecting fees and release forms and so on. But the resident organizer really oversees what's going on at the garden. Checks in every once in a while, makes sure everybody's tending the gardens and so forth. So the yoga program could operate in a similar vein. We would have a resident organizer, somebody who could collect if there was to be a fee, and it doesn't look like you've proposed a fee, but if there was a fee, but collect the waivers from the release and waivers, no harm, no foul kind of things. We would, handle it much the same way, where the resident organizer really was the person in charge who would be at the event and collect the releases, or they would have a list of people who have signed releases, and if somebody there hasn't signed a release, could get a release. So we would have that. That would have the resident organizer would do that. We've noted that the participants should know that there's no equipment. The village hall opens at 8:30. We wouldn't prepare the area for the class. There's no special mosquito spraying or any of those kinds of things. And that the village doesn't certify or otherwise license the yoga instructor. However, we would require a certificate of insurance from the instructor. because if the village is paying, and it's proposed that the village pay the fee for the instructor, so therefore the village would want the certificate of insurance from the instructor. One of the things that we pointed out here is that the board may wish to review the proposed fee that has been put forward in the proposal. The village expense, the expense would be categorized under administration village expense, and that's where we have a budget already established. And again, the yoga instructor would be required to provide a resume especially a certificate of insurance. So under those conditions, and as noted, there wouldn't be anybody from village staff associated with it. So somebody, the resident organizer would want to attend all of those sessions in order to collect those fees. And I don't, would you be the resident organizer then?
I actually wanted to suggest that since this activity, that the instructor is going to be paid, that they should carry the responsibility of making sure that folks sign the waivers. And I am not anticipating printed waivers. I'm anticipating a QR code that they scan and sign right there on their phones. They're not a volunteer.
That would be
They're
fine
getting
if
paid.
the yoga instructor takes care of the
So I think this should be part of their
waivers
responsibility.
and makes sure that the waivers get to the village hall and so on. And that would be fine. Should we go out and ask for other applicants to be yoga instructors, or I don't know?
Other as in, I'm not teaching the class.
No, okay, all right, fine, fine, that's good, fine.
That's good.
Where do we find these guys? Trustee Jamerson.
Well, I'm not a yoga instructor and I wouldn't be doing it, so
As far as the fee is concerned,
Yeah,
and you mentioned the garden, the community garden. The village subsidizes the garden. I mean, the people that
Yeah.
have plots there don't pay the full fee, correct?
oh, that's correct, that's correct.
So, and my guess is that this $1,350, if that's what it's going to cost, is probably way less than the village is subsidizing the 12 plots of the village.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So it would be $1,500 for, yeah.
We would.
Mayor, there's a typo.
Yes, there is.
I just caught that. The math, the wrong zero. Sorry about that. Yeah. So $1,500.
No, that's fine, that's fine.
I mean, I think if we're going to subsidize the people at the community garden, 12 of them,
Yeah,
to a greater degree than this whole program costs, we should also just make this program free, in my opinion. So it's my opinion. But
well, yeah, no, I don't think it was proposed as a fee for participants.
Yeah.
I was just suggesting if you chose to, yeah, yeah,
So that's all.
yeah.
I think it's a great idea.
No, that's fine. Trustee Smith.
Yeah, no, I think it's a wonderful idea. I think it's a great way to build community. So I really am excited about this. And I think, like Trustee Jamerson said, I think we should just do it at village expense and not collect fees because I'm not sure it's worth the trouble.
No, that's fine.
Yep.
I just wanted
Yes.
to address the question as to where we're going to get these instructors. I've got 7 who would be happy to teach, all certified with a bio that they're happy to submit for evaluation. I'm happy to pick my favorite, but if you want to take a vote on this and make this an agenda topic,
No,
I'll be
no,
happy
I
to
don't,
leave
I don't think
this
we need
at
to
your
go that far.
discretion.
If the board agrees that, and there'd be a limit of $1,500, I mean, people can argue, is that a lot for a yoga instructor or not? It's 10 sessions, 150 a session. I don't know what those prices are for those people. I really have no idea. But if the board wishes to go ahead with it, and we can get a hold of an instructor who would be willing to monitor and make sure that the releases are signed and so forth.
Okay.
We're good.
President
Trustee
Ford?
Eastman,
Oh,
please.
sorry.
I guess I would add my support to this concept generally, but I guess the issue that I have is sort of thinking about the community garden, right? We obviously subsidize that to some extent. We're going to subsidize this fully. What I struggle with, and I know I don't want to go down the village roads route here because yes, there's an element where stuff just, isn't always uniform. But I do wonder what would be the limiting principle on somebody else coming and saying, we're not recovering costs for this. Why not my idea of X? And I wouldn't say that that's enough to get me to not vote against this now, but I would think about that because the problem is once you start adding those things, where do you stop and draw the line, right? I mean, this is de minimis in terms of the cost, but if you keep adding, you might run into issues with that and how people feel like it's treated uniformly without attempting to recover costs in some way.
There is a budget for administration village events, so that's one way to control it. Just want to throw that out there. So if we do this, then we've only got 8,500 left.
Well, it's actually 1,700 if you count the.
Well, I would, I mean, publicizing it, I think if we did the word of mouth
Yeah,
and the
I think we
newsletter.
just do the electronic
I don't think we
newsletter.
need to, I don't think there needs to be a,
That's fine.
yeah.
It's like game day. You just,
Yeah, it just happens.
it just
Yeah.
happens.
Word
It
of
just
mouth.
happens.
Yeah.
So,
I did
Trustee
actually
Smith,
have
yes.
one question for Trustee Dickin and then one question for our attorney.
Mhm.
How many, Trustee Dickin, how many people do you think could or would, or how many people do you expect to attend?
So it's funny, yesterday, actually, I started an online petition, and I've limited it to Riverwoods, thinking maybe I'll get 12. So 46 as of 5 PM, and I just checked again, and there's 58. Obviously, that doesn't mean that all 58 are going to show up on Monday morning at 7 AM every day.
Yep.
But I think this is an indication that there is interest
There's interest.
in the community.
So I think that's great. And then the question I had for our attorney is if the village is paying the instructor, do we have any risk or do we have to do any sort of criminal background check or anything like that? Since it would.
Or are they just a
With
consultant?
the instructor.
Well, yeah, and then
Specifically
so
the
I'm
instructor.
asking the question of, do we need to do something? And if we don't, that's probably better.
I don't know if I want to comment on whether if we don't, it's probably better, but I think we'll in the process of meeting, I'm assuming you'll recommend a few people, maybe we'll probably ask them to come in. We kind of get their background, their bio. Their vendors are not employees. So, we hire vendors all the time without doing, they're 1099, right? So I think we use common sense.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And
Okay, Trustee Dickin, yes.
did you want me to prepare the waiver that I've used when we hosted yoga, or do you have a document of
We
your
have a
own?
waiver.
Okay,
We just use basically
We have
the
a
format
standard.
we use for the garden already.
okay. If this is something that you could forward me, I'll prepare it so that it's just an easy signature that they could do online by scanning their phone.
No. I mean, we have, following the format of what we do for the garden, it just kind of all falls in the same kind
Okay,
of,
perfect. So
same kind
is
of
there a
thing.
vote after this, or?
I'm sorry, yeah. Well, somebody needs to make a motion.
To approve the creation of the yoga program and fund
Yeah.
it for $1,500 for
Yes.
this summer?
Well, I think it's 1750.
Well,
Let's do $1,500.
we were talking
because
about
we're not
getting rid of
gonna
the
do
200.
census.
Yep.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Is there any further discussion? Roll call.
Trustee Eastman?
Aye.
Trustee Hollander?
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson?
Aye.
Trustee Smith?
Aye.
Trustee Diggin?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda, approval of a settlement offer and amounts for easements related to the Saunders Road resurfacing project. Director Witt, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So as I alluded to at a previous board meeting, Santa Cruz Associates is working on settlement amounts. Those numbers have been established, yet they are not quite finalized. The Lake County Department of Public Works is bringing their recommendation for approval to their April 8th meeting. So we should have that finalized and back to Santa Cruz on the 9th. The other two, particularly the Park District and the one private property, those numbers have been established. The numbers did go up. Originally, we were looking at 18,400, and a total of the three cases has come to 23,500. As minor as the amount was for the county, was originally $300. They've decided to grant the easement for no cost to the village. I just thought it's worth people knowing. So what we're looking for is just, this is basically an informative thing, but I just want the board to understand that it is a change from the numbers that were originally presented.
So do I have an approval for the settlement offer?
So moved? Is that, do I need to make a
I
motion?
think you do.
I'll make a motion that we approve the settlement offers.
Is there a second, please?
I'll second it.
Are there any questions?
Why would we not approve this? Like under what would be a valid reason not to?
It's not
approve
enough
this?
money? I don't know.
It's too much money. And then we can-
We're paying money to acquire temporary easements and in one case, a permanent easement.
It's too much.
If we don't get the easements in time, we can't do the project. We can't do the project without the easements. We're kind of like Lake County is when it comes to.
Yeah.
So basically, haven't yet approved the form of the easement. A draft is being circulated, just as we reviewed and modified and improved the easements that we granted to Lake County. I expect that some of the participants here will be interested in the form of the easement, but basically this is giving our negotiator authority to say, we have authority to settle at this amount. And then the actual easements will probably be back before the board at some point.
Are there any other questions?
And we need that to occur in order for the project to move forward, because it's got to go, once they finalize their paperwork, they will submit it to IDOT. IDOT has to approve it, and that approval needs to be done, I forget by what date, in order for us to get on the June letting. And this is really the sticking point to getting us to the June letting.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Hollander?
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson? Aye. Trustee Smith?
Aye.
Trustee Dickin?
Aye.
Trustee Eastman?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, next order of business, approval of the resolution authorizing utilization of TIF revenues for the Milwaukee Deerfield redevelopment project area and the Deerfield Road redevelopment project area. Director Vest, oh, it's you.
I think this
Okay.
is me.
Village Attorney,
I can't put this off on our poor director because we have two TIF funds in the village, and under the TIF law, we're supposed to look at the status of projects in the TIF area, each TIF area, what we've accomplished. In fact, we file an annual report with the Office of the Comptroller where we detail what we've done, what our plans in the future are for the redevelopment project areas, as they're called. The first TIF area is the area that encompasses the Thornton's gas station, CubeSmart, and a portion of the landfill that's already in the village, about 8 acres just to the south of that. The second TIF area encompasses the Elevate Nursing Skilled Care Facility, the Federal Life Parcel, and the Colonial Court Shopping Center. The two TIF areas are contiguous. They touch each other. When we complete all of the work we ever think we're going to do in a TIF, there's a requirement as to whether or not the incremental tax revenue that the TIF generates is still needed to further the project purposes. So for example, in the first TIF area, if we had a bond outstanding, there's no question the surplus would be needed until the bond is paid off. We have no bond outstanding in TIF number 1. We were able to pay off the money that the general fund advanced to develop the Thorntons and the CubeSmart about a year ago. We paid that off. So what is the continuing amount of increment that TIF number 1 generates to be used for? Well, we still have proposals coming in for the 8 acres in the landfill site. Just in the last couple of weeks, we've heard about a possible data center. As the board knows, we've looked at logistics center on the site. So the site is still in play to be redeveloped, just don't know with what. But we still incur some expenses and costs in reviewing those proposals, but potentially getting ready for an annexation or rezoning. The increment from TIF number 1 has been averaging, I'm going to say with the current improvements now with both Thorntons and CubeSmart, $120,000 a year total. I'm putting you on the spot.
Sounds in the neighborhood. I don't have the exact figure in front of me.
In other words, right now going forward, we have increment that, reliably could continue to be generated for some time from TIF number 1. TIF number 2 is underwater. For one thing, we've been incurring costs without any new increment. For another thing, we're removing an improvement which generates taxable value, and we're converting the property to tax exempt status. We knew this when we went forward with the project. Because we continue to incur expenses on TIF number 2, our suggestion is to transfer increment from TIF 1 to TIF 2. The TIF law specifically authorizes the transfer of increment from one TIF to the other. Now, we, in our budget presentation, showed increment moving from TIF 1 to TIF 2. That was something that the board already approved in the budget. I felt because of the enhanced, I guess, scrutiny that TIFs are getting these days, every season in Springfield, there are new bills being proposed, and many of them concern the transparency over what is happening with surplus. Is the governing body adequately looking at the surplus to see whether it's still needed? And otherwise, is it taking money from other taxing districts that should be returned to them, or is it doing something useful with the money? So after talking about this with Director Vasquez, we decided that having some kind of record that, okay, we've taken stock of where we are. We've looked at what's going on. We have these two projects. They are contiguous. We have a lot of stuff going on in TIF 2 for which we need some support. And this authorizes the village. It ratifies the transfer that we made in the budget prior, and it authorizes us to continue making these transfers in the future so long as we have these valid expenses in TIF 2. So this is a bit of a belt and suspenders resolution. The only thing I'll point out to you, if you look on page, help me here, 53 of the packet, I think this is page 2 of the resolution. At the top of the page, there's a couple of whereas clauses. What we did in the resolution is we put in some of the information that actually we've submitted to the comptroller in our annual reports. But I thought I would just point this out to the board. Page 53 of the packet. So the general fund of the village provided, as it says here, approximately $950,000 to acquire parcels in TIF 1. And as a result, CubeSmart and later the Thornton's development have invested over, I would say, $15 million in improvements. So when you look at the success of a TIF, one of the things that is a traditional planning measure, whether a TIF is successful, is the ratio of public investment to private investment. If you spend a lot more on public investment and very little on private investment, you maybe haven't, sometimes there are public goals that you have to achieve that you have to do that. But in this case, in TIF 1, for the amount of public investment we've made, we've generated a lot of improvements on the private side, not only in the money they spend on the improvements, in the employment that they provide, in the sales tax that they provide, in the motor fuel tax and gasoline tax that they provide, and the increment that they generate. So TIF 1, from this viewpoint, has been very successful as an example of public-private effort. And TIF 2, we're not necessarily going to achieve the same economic result, but we're trying to achieve a public service benefit. So that's just a snapshot. The board doesn't always see all the detail that goes in these comptroller reports, but we did put that in the resolution to make it a matter of public record here as well. So what this resolution in short does is find that the purposes described in TIF 1 and TIF 2 are ongoing and incomplete. There's no existing surplus of TIF 1. It's needed to be utilized jointly for TIF 1 and TIF 2 expenses, and authorizing those transfers to be made for that purpose.
Does anyone have any questions? Do I have a motion for approval of this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Trustee Jamerson?
Aye.
Trustee Smith?
Aye.
Trustee Dickin?
Aye.
Trustee Eastman?
Aye.
Trustee Hollander?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item of business is a discussion of the creation of a project evaluation committee. Trustee Hollander, would you like to lead us through this, please?
I think we discussed this at the last meeting. Tonight's yoga proposal was a classic example that would fit into something like this. community garden would have been years ago, something. I don't know how often this is going to be needed, but at least it gives us a formal way to evaluate what's needed from the village or not, what the obligations will be, and it'll be a way for the board to get some structure as to when they go ahead and evaluate these things. I don't know if it'll be I doubt it'll be a standing committee. My guess is that it'll be as needed. I don't see any reason not to do it, but maybe some others have some questions. I do know that Mike Clayton had some suggestions about this, which were reasonable, but I believe that this probably will be modified as after the first time this thing meets, if we approve it.
Just to clarify, because Henry, you mentioned that it might be a committee that's, brought into existence as needed. Is that one possibility in your mind, that if someone has an idea, you propose that the committee be assembled for that purpose, look into the project, or would it?
No, my idea was to have, in this case, it would be actually Trustee Smith who might be overseeing the committee permanently because of his responsibilities, and bringing in a second trustee if it falls into something that's of their interest. The idea that would be as needed is it would only be generated, the meeting would only occur if something came into it, but it would be a permanent committee that would be, whose purpose was to evaluate. I just didn't think it was going to be meeting more than once or twice a year, probably, depending on the number of projects that might come in. We just have no way of, in this format of a board meeting, evaluating these, discussing them, getting all the information. It's awkward.
Is there any discussion at this point? Trustee Jamerson?
I think it's a great idea, and I do agree that with Trustee Hollander that it's probably, excuse me, only going to be something that's used once or twice a year, maybe. But I think it would be good to have a framework for these things so that they could be vetted out before they get to the board, and most of the questions can be asked and answered by the committee. And if there's something that falls under a different trustee's purview, then that trustee would be, brought on as a member of the committee on a temporary basis. I think it's a great idea.
Would it be something that where the resident services committee is that what Jeff?
Yeah, that's what community services.
Community services. Could that committee have this dual function in that way?
I have no objection to how it's organized. I just would like to have the function available.
And the structure.
Yeah. We have this for donations. A few years ago, we got requests for donations, and we would talk about it and make a decision, yay or nay. Now there's a formal process. You have to fill out certain forms, and each donation request is uniform, and that's what I was looking for in this as well.
The donation request I don't know if that would be the best example, because people fill out forms and then they're brought to the board.
I have a better example. So we've talked
Certainly,
about
certainly.
we've talked about the electronic policy for the newsletter, for the online newsletter, and I think this is kind of to make sure that if I have a hamster that dies, that I don't request that an obituary is published in the electronic newsletter for the village. I realize that this is a stretch, but I think that you get the point that we want structure, and we want to make sure that whatever idea is brought to the board addresses specific questions before it even deserves a discussion.
The mechanism that we've been using is ideas come forward and the staff looks at them, and then we bring it to the board. So there's some kind of vetting that has already gone on. Or we come to the board and say, what's the temperature? What would the board wish to go forward with? For example, gaming. Do we have the appetite to move forward with gaming? And the board did not have the appetite to move forward with gaming, therefore we did not go through a vetting process. We didn't do further research because the board just didn't show an appetite for going further. If the board does show an appetite for going further, then we organize staff around that particular process. I am a bit concerned with assigning it's the two masters kind of thing. The organization is appropriate staff members assigned based on nature of the project. So there are lots of things going on administratively in the village that have to keep moving forward. And does staff report then to the administrator and say, I have to do this first because the committee is doing this? Or who does staff go to first? Who does staff say this is more important than that? So it can be a competition of resources. To form yet another committee when we have other mechanisms, for example, the board comments section, and we've offered committee of the whole to the board, where maybe one meeting back in history, one of our meetings was a committee of the whole, and the second meeting of the month was for business. So we could have that kind of we could do that again. We could have the first 30 minutes of a second board meeting from 7 to 7:30 being a committee of the whole where people just hash through ideas. Having another committee is with forms and so on and so forth seems to add a level of bureaucracy to a very small organization that perhaps we don't need. I think that the frustrations that have been felt in the past were heard, and we dedicated an entire workshop to an idea that one of the trustees had felt wasn't properly vetted or addressed. The idea of the yoga session came through the board comments, and then we put it on the agenda, and the board was able to determine. So I think we have mechanisms in place. We're not that big. We only have so much staff. And another committee, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily add anything. So I know this is just discussion, and if the board wishes to go further with this, we can indeed put this on the agenda. We also have 2 new board members who will be joining us in 2 more meetings. And it would affect, it affects them more, as well. So I had asked before if we could put this off to the workshop so we could talk about it there. But the board was of a mind to discuss it earlier. So here we are. So any comments on those statements, please?
Mayor, Trustee Eastman.
Trustee Dicken, please.
I'm
sorry, Trustee Eastman, please.
So my question is, so the committee of the whole, if we had that idea, right, that would be a public meeting where we would discuss things sort of, but have it dedicated more towards a free-flowing conversation that would vet these things on a regular basis.
Right. The traditional purpose of the committee of the whole is to discuss matters on which no action will be taken during that meeting. So it's intended as a discussion type of format. But in terms of open to the public, I would caution that it's very, if there's a couple of trustees and they're meeting on something like this, we have to be very cautious about inadvertently tripping into the Open Meetings Act. And, it's possible that a trustee and or 2 trustees can meet without violating the act, but it's also, I would just caution that working on village business, we like this with the sustainability group, we try to make sure that, they comply with the Open Meetings Act. I would just want to be, I don't know that you should think of a standing committee of the board as able to meet and not have it be open to the public more easily than a committee of the whole. I think if it's a standing committee of the board, you almost by nature have to announce when it's meeting, when it's having its
Right.
public, anything it does where it's taking action, it should be open if it's a standing committee.
So it gets to my point about, I mean, my concern was more about transparency, right? I mean, to me, I would rather just have it as a standing meeting where we hash these things out in public rather than a committee like this where, it's done a little bit more behind closed doors, or at least the initial vetting, and we have, only 2 trustees that are acting on it. I mean, I guess my point is the more we can simply vet these things out and people can see where people stand, and kind of see us working together in public, I think that's preferred to, I mean, my concern is this might, and it's not a personal concern, but just more of a procedural and organizational concern, that you would give too much power to the community services trustee, right? It's him or her and one other trustee. So my concern would be, there's the possibility that you just don't get the input of all of the trustees. I mean, my thought is we kind of have this informal process anyways. Why not, utilize it and just, have a standing meeting where we hash these things out. And if we don't have anything to discuss, then we don't do it that month. Is there a way to just do, that half an hour on an ad hoc basis, or maybe every other meeting? I mean, it's not.
I think that basically, if there's nothing to be decided, if there's no desire to participate in committee of whole at 7 o'clock, if the mayor's here at 7 o'clock and no one shows up, there's no quorum, and it just defaults to the regular village board meeting at 7:30. So I don't think that, I think you can keep it on a regular basis. I think you could, the only thing about scheduling it on an ad hoc basis, which you could do, you just have to make sure you give appropriate notice to media and anyone who wants to be notified of village meetings, and post, 48 hours in advance and all that stuff. So it probably could, it doesn't have to meet every month if there's nothing to discuss, but it would be easy to have it, as there, and then just simply not hold the meeting because no one shows up until 7:30.
I think from my perspective, that would be the preferred option.
Trustee Jamerson, please.
So my comment to Trustee Eastman is, you're worried about transparency, right? That's what you said. So right now, all that happens in those back offices. All what you're talking about, all of the stuff that's been proposed on this happens back there in those offices that the public is not invited to. So if anything, having trustees do it, who can then come to this meeting and talk about it, is going to add transparency as opposed to mass transparency, in my opinion. And I think that sometimes, and I'll probably get flamed for saying this, I think sometimes stuff disappears in the back offices. If it doesn't want to end up on the top of the board, it doesn't end up on the top of the board. And it gets put down at the bottom of the pile. And that's not saying that there aren't other things that are more important, because there are a lot of things that are important in this village. But sometimes things do get put on the back burner, and they end up staying on the back burner until the back burner falls off the stove.
But then I guess, and then, I mean, we probably don't need to discuss this at this point, but I mean, it gets to the issue of, well, where does the power lie, right? Is the power in the executive or, mayoral staff function, or is it in the trustee function? And I guess my thought is, and this is just, I'm not necessarily entirely informed as to where that split is based on, how we're organized, but we need to be cognizant of that too, right? I mean, I guess I would, before we would vote on something like this, I would kind of want to know, where does that power lie, or where should that power lie? Because I mean, it's a sharing of power, right? I guess it's not as
Well, the
clear.
mayor already told us 2 meetings ago, I believe it was, that she controls the agenda at this meeting. And if she wants something on this agenda, it shows up on this agenda. If she doesn't want it on there, 4 trustees have to come up and say, yes, they want it on the agenda. But 4 trustees aren't supposed to talk to each other.
Right, but if we had that standing committee, which we don't currently have, wouldn't that give anybody, time at any time to potentially raise those things when they want to without going to the mayor? I mean, isn't that sort of a halfway step? I agree that maybe, now it isn't ideal, but I'm not so sure. I guess we have to be careful of where the actual authority lies. And the answer is, I don't know the answer to that right now, but that's
I'm going
something
to
that we
say
should
this
think about.
before we go further. There is nothing that I am doing that has not been done in prior administrations. I beg to differ with you, Trustee Jamerson. I have checked with our prior mayor, Aaron Norris. He said he controlled the agenda. And the agenda is prescribed when we have operational things that need to come before the board, when trustees have said they want stuff on the agenda, they want to deal with things. The privatization, that if you're talking about that being put on the back burner, that's the latest example. But the mayor, the administration of the village is vested in the mayor and the staff. We have hired incredibly experienced, credentialed, professional staff that we need to rely on. And that staff looks at the issues in front of this village issues that should be brought to the board, that need to be brought to the board. Almost every nickel we spend comes to the board. I'm sorry if you feel that things have been put on a back burner and they've been lost or they've been deep sixed or whatever you want to call it. I'm not aware of that. And I will tell you that I have continued the practice that I understand happened before. And I was a trustee for a number of years as well. So before we go further, I'm telling you that that is how I am behaving. And that's how I've looked at the village and what the village, the operations of the village and what is important to our community. Trustee Hollander.
Yeah, let me just take a moment here. The purpose of this committee was so that there would have someone be able to look at the information, gather everything we needed, hopefully to be able to make a decision at the board level. These are for projects that the Board of Trustees need to approve or evaluate, not the mayor, not the executive function. These are things that we as a village would like to see. And part of the job of the Board of Trustees is determine what do we want to do with the village. I believe that's separate and apart from the running of the village. So the purpose of this is to come up with something like a yoga idea. Is this something we want to do? A community guard is something we want to do? That's up to the Board of Trustees. And if we are willing to put forth the funds to make it happen, to add a half-time staff to make it happen, that's up to the board, not up to the mayor.
Agree, and that has not been sidestepped. I've not kept that from you.
Yeah, I wasn't making this problem. What I'm saying is the purpose of the committee is to look at functions that the board would take on approving or not approving a project. That's totally different than what I think is being discussed here. It's a method by which we can look at something and decide if we want to do it and put the funds towards it.
Perhaps this is a topic for the workshop, for our governance workshop.
I thought we were
things are
going
done.
to put it on the agenda to vote on it tonight. Am I wrong?
I've got discussion of the creation of a project evaluation committee.
So do we have the authority to make a motion to
Have
approve
the
it or
authority,
not?
the board has the authority to establish a special committee, not a standing committee, but a special committee.
What is the difference between the two?
Special committee is like the sustainability where there's a beginning and an end, and a standing committee are like the committees that we report to on a monthly basis.
May I just add a comment?
Yes.
I think all of us who ran for office ran because we wanted to make this village a better place, because we felt that we could contribute in ways that haven't been contributed in the past. I think we didn't run specifically so that we can vote on the development or formation of SSAs or repaving Saunders Road or things like that, right? We had specific ideas which we thought we could bring to the village, implement and make this a better place, whether it's in terms of sustainability, process optimizations, cost reductions, all kinds of improvements. It has been my personal experience over the last 4 years that you kind of need a coalition of opinions and folks who feel that your idea is actually good enough to be brought to the board. And and I don't know what experience other trustees have had, but I have come to you, Mayor, with a series of ideas that have received the same answer, that it's a great idea, but followed by a series of why it's not a good time. Hence, I feel that having the ability to circulate ideas with the board, to have discussions, but structured discussions so that they're not all over the place, so that we come to the board with, there's a form that you have to have all of these check marks checked off before you bring an idea up for a discussion. I think this is a worthy change of process. And I understand that you're saying that you're doing things similarly to previous administrations, but that's not to say that there isn't a good reason to make improvements to the process. And I say this with utmost respect.
Well, the board can create a special committee. The mayor creates the standing committees, as the mayor said.
How does a special committee?
All committees shall be, I'm just reading from our code, all committees shall be appointed by the president with the approval of a majority of the trustees. So if the board wanted to establish a special committee, it could. And then the chairperson of the committee and the members would be appointed by the village president at some time.
But I'd like to move that we establish a special committee that would meet as needed for this purpose that was outlined. I have no problem with Mayor selecting the chairperson and other members of the committee. And if it, at the end of a year, if it's not working like we want it to, it doesn't have to continue. But I think it's a mistake not to allow a process to occur when someone has good ideas. We had a sustainability committee that was formed. It's another example of a way of evaluating, is this useful, is this helpful? And if so, go ahead and do it.
Mayor Ford?
Trustee Smith, please.
I think conceptually it is the right idea. The question is, how does it work and how does it function? One of my concerns, quite honestly, and since I'm kind of the trustee that's being kind of tagged to do this, is I still work a full-time job. This is being a trustee is a volunteer for me. And my question is, what do we think? I don't want to commit to something and then not be able to do it. It's really kind of my point.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to figure out, is this an extra hour a week, an extra hour a month, an extra hour a year? I'm just trying to get some sense of magnitude, because if we are doing this within the village, Director Witt, Director Vasquez are doing certain things, maybe there's another way to do this where maybe there's just some interaction between village staff and a trustee, so that a trustee knows what's going on kind of separately. Kind of getting back to the idea of making sure that things on the back burner don't fall off the back burner. So I'm wondering, and Trustee Hollander, I'm not opposed to it. I'm just trying to get a sense of what's being asked and how much is going to be expected of me or any other trustee that would be put into this position. Because I feel like if we've got 6 full-time village staff doing this kind of stuff already, quite honestly, I don't have time to be a full-time village employee for free.
My guess is, since we haven't had any projects except for the couple that have come up in the last few weeks, this is something that's going to be less than weekly or monthly. I mean, Mike Clayton and I are involved in the land use thing, which you'll get on April 15th. We'll get a final report. It's taken 2 or 3 meetings, 45 minutes of our time. These are things that as trustees, we have some responsibility to oversee.
Mm-hmm.
I do not foresee this thing meeting except on a project by project basis. And based on our history, we've only had this happen 2 or 3 times.
And my concern, Trustee Hollander, is, and I don't disagree with you. When you and I spoke, well, when this was previously discussed, I expected it to be low requirement. Let me say it that way. But as I read this again, you know, it's from trustees, it's from residents that choose to submit a form. I mean, it could be, and you know, I just don't have any sense. This could be a fair amount of work, and I'm just wondering, is there maybe another way to, no offense meant, skin the cat differently?
Go ahead.
I think it might take a little bit more time than you think. It depends on the project. We had somebody write in who wanted to do something with bat houses. Is that an appropriate topic for this? Is that a project that we need to dive into and look at? And then finally do an approval recommendation to the board, or further information required, or recommended not to pursue? It would seem to me you would need to keep a list of those projects that have been submitted to you. And then somehow get staff and experts or whomever to come and sit with you, and so you could put together a report assessing cost and funding options, community impact and benefit, relevant stakeholders, et cetera, concise project summary, financial impact analysis, resource requirements, anticipated benefits to the village, any potential concerns or risks. If we were a village of 10,000, this would, of course, be a much better fit, but we're simply not. And I think it's overkill, quite honestly. I think we have other mechanisms for addressing these things. I think I mean, I don't know what projects you're talking about being deep sixed. I think the point of our municipal government is to, you know, it's the health and safety and welfare of the community. And that sometimes those aren't like really exciting things. I mean, did everybody listen to every word we talked about with the TIF? But that's what we, you know, sorry, I couldn't help it. You know, there are lots of things that we do that take a lot of time, but they're focused on the financial impact of the community as a whole, focused on roads and health and welfare, and just, it's astonishing. This isn't an HOA. This is a municipality with, you know, tax revenues coming in. We have a police department that we have to, you know, be concerned about. We have a building department that still continues to be overwhelmed. We have a finance department who has finally gotten a checkbook balanced after 15 years. I mean, there are all these things. You know, we are the stewards of the, you know, of the tax money that comes in. We are to do things for the benefit of the community. Sometimes those things, you know, there are things that somebody I know just said this to me recently. There are lots of things that are nice to do, and community services and so forth. And then there are things we must do. We have a strategic plan that hasn't been revisited in 10 years. We have a comprehensive plan that hasn't been revisited since it was written in 2019. There are things we must do. That our comprehensive plan needs to be reviewed. The strategic plan needs to be redone again. And sometimes things that are nice to do take resources away from things that we must do. And those are tough decisions. Those are very difficult decisions. Sitting with us every day, we have a staff meeting every Wednesday, and well, tomorrow will be Thursday, because we like to have our staff meetings after the board meeting to see what we've all discussed here and how that's going to fit into the workloads we currently have. How are we going to do that? How are we going to answer that lady who wants to talk about bat houses and doing something for the bats? Because we're taking the trees down on Federal Life. You know, what are we going to, you know, how do we help partner with the RPC and Earth Days coming up? You know, and how are we going to change the cost sharing program so that maybe we can have the HOAs participate in that? So there are lots of things that are going on. There are lots of things that are going on. And sometimes, you know, I apologize if things get lost, but there are I have not gotten, I'm trying to get back to the stormwater management issue. It's hard to keep going on these big things when you're trying to keep the little things moving along too. I wish we had more staff where we could, focus more on community services, but partnering with the RRA seems to be trying to fill that role. The RPC is stepping up. I think the best example of all of this is the Sustainability Committee, where we had residents come in and residents took hold, and we have a liaison with our Community Services Trustee, but they took hold and we're going to be getting a report on May 6th. So it's running the village is kind of a tough balancing act, if you will. And not everybody's going to be happy all the time because, they think we're not doing something fast enough. Lord knows we didn't hire people fast enough, and I wish we could have, but boy, the folks we've got now, I don't know how we operated without you before. The burden on our village council has just been incredible over the years. So we're gaining steam, we're getting even, we're not addressing everything. Another committee is not particularly helpful, It adds one more committee that we need to keep track of. It adds those things. We try to bring you in our reports. Our directors try to bring you up to date on all of the things that are out there, all of the things that we're trying to do, all of the things that are still sitting there that we can't get to. God knows I'd love to get back to our banking relationships. So you see, and I'm trying to explain all of this to you by saying, can't we operate as a group? Can't we talk together at one time? Do we have to go through that? Trustee Eastman, please. Thank you
So
for cutting me off.
kind of synthesizing all the different comments that I'm hearing, I mean, I agree this is an interesting framework, and this discussion has been pretty useful in kind of trying to framing what the role is of staff and the mayor, and also what the proper role is of trustees. I mean, maybe if we take this framework, which was thoughtfully put together, discuss it in our governance workshop, because it really hits upon some of those key issues that we should discuss in that. And then if we decide that it does make sense, then bring it forward and give the two new trustees a chance to give their insight on it, since we're so close to a transition in that regard. Maybe that's a path forward, right? And that would give Trustee Smith a chance to think about, his own thoughts on being responsible for this. And, maybe that's a way of keeping it going, but in a constructive way.
Yeah, and thank you, Trustee Eastman. I thought that was really well said. And maybe Trustee Dickon, is there a way on the website to sort of start capturing, maybe not the entire submission form as identified in item 1, but really just kind of the ideas?
Absolutely.
So we can sort of start getting a sense of what might we be talking about before we formalize either a committee or the working committee. I'm sorry, now I'm drawing a blank on what that other possible element was. Committee of the whole.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a way to help us synthesize of, how much value does this bring or not?
So this is a draft. The committee is going to form its own, the committee will form its own way of organizing and the information it wants. If someone wants to put the place for bats, they may find they only need 2 or 3 pieces of information and be done with it. I think the committee itself would determine how much they need in order to bring something forward to the board. This is purely a draft to show what the outside information might be necessary. And I would like to differentiate that. Maybe I'm leaving the board, but I want to differentiate what the trustees as a board have a responsibility and an obligation and a way of participating in the village, which is separate and apart from the mayor and the executive function. Yep. We approve expenditures, we approve programs, but the trustees have may have a different viewpoint on how to do things for the village that are separate and apart from the executive. This doesn't reduce it from the mayor's obligations. I recognize the amount of work that's required of the people here. But the committee can decide how deep they want to go into something or not. But there is no way presently to push forward an idea onto the board for its decision. The only way that can be done is if 4 trustees get together and say, we want to talk about whether or not there should be bat housing. Otherwise, there is no way to do that. And I think that we ought to have the capacity as trustees to think about the things that might help the village. This is the only way that I know that that can be done. Now, if there is another way, I'd like to learn about it.
The board comments section of the agenda, I think, was an attempt to do that. But if it's not fulfilling its function, if it's not fulfilling that function, then perhaps we don't need it. Trustee Dicken.
So I think we may have gotten a little bit off track as to why this was even brought up for a discussion. I think the whole, and Andy, you brought up a good topic of transparency. I think transparency is key. And I think that if one trustee or a resident or several residents feel that there is an idea that's worth being brought up to the board, it needs to be brought up to the board in a structured way. So I think one of the things that we need to establish is structure for anything that deserves the board's attention. And then the second item, whether it's determined via a committee or internal staff, I think that's also still up for a discussion, but perhaps procedurally, if there is a structured idea that whoever feels deserves the board's attention, perhaps there is a space on the agenda, just like you've mentioned, comments from the board. Is that what it's called, comments from the board? Where these ideas are presented as bullet points and can be presented in a structured way. I think what we're talking about here is that we want to maintain transparency among the trustees, and we want to make sure that anything that the residents are bringing up to the board is presented in a structural way. And then the board, at that time could make a decision as to whether or not they want an item of discussion to be added to the agenda. So then at that point, we're not going to need a separate committee, but there's still going to be structure to a process, and then the board as a whole can decide whether an item deserves place on the agenda.
Yeah, and I think
Would that be a reasonable process?
Yep. I mean, I think that's a very reasonable process, and I think, that first step would be creating a forum for residents, trustees, anybody to create, hey, this is what I want, and maybe it includes the submission form as outlined, or, some variation of that, so that we can have the ability to understand what's the request, what's expected, and expected costs. So then, sort of like Trustee Jamerson, how you report on building permits, the first meeting or second meeting of the month, I could do the same thing with these ideas, so that it does not become backburnered, and it does become public knowledge.
Yeah. I wish
And getting back at the idea of transparency.
We do have, and by law, we're required to have residents wishing to address the board. So we have a place by law on every agenda where people can bring ideas to the board. For example, they're concerned about the open burning ordinance was brought to the board by residents. So
By residents at a board.
that is one way that the law at least tries to address that subject of having the public have the ability to bring something of concern that they have to the board's attention. Based on that recent experience, at least from their perspective, that seems to be working, that they're able to articulate. They're not able to get the result they want, but they're able to articulate a concern, right? That seems to be, I'm hearing more of a conversation about getting board input on some matters, but I've seen a lot of residents address the board, and they seem to have no problem saying, I'd like the board to consider this, or I'd like the board to consider that.
So I guess what is the opposition in creating structure to the process?
Well, the requirement to have a place in the agenda for the public to address the board, I guess I'm suggesting as a legal structure that is a requirement that we have under the Open Meetings Act. That's one of the things that we do.
Is there a motion on the floor?
I think Henry
I don't
had made a motion to form the special committee.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there further discussion?
This would be a motion for the committee to be a project evaluation committee, something in line with with further details as set forth on the board. I mean, but
The committee would set its own structure, in the sense, not the structure, but it's how it's going to operate,
okay.
which may be more minimal to compared to what's here, but
Okay.
that's each project would probably have a different structure.
Okay. Basically under the rules of special committees in our code.
Right, so just to
Trustee
clarify,
Jamerson.
so, excuse me, the mayor would be in charge of the chairperson and the committee members, right?
Right.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm on the same page.
Subject to approval of the board. It's the mayor appoints.
Well, yeah, but just like any other thing, the
Yeah.
mayor brings it to the board approves it. Okay.
Yeah, you've got a question. No? Please, clerk.
Well, I was just listening to your guys' conversation, and I've gone through a similar situation in my past experience. You guys are lawmakers and policymakers. And if it is the policy of the board that you wish to see more community events, then you could set that policy, set a dollar amount to it, and then you as, for example, community services, the head of the community services, people could vet those programs through you. You know that there's a certain dollar amount. Just to Trustee Eastman's point, like how far does it go? Everyone keeps coming in different programs. And then you, in the beginning of the year, around the time you guys set the budget, you would maybe pick 4 programs you want to see, have staff evaluate them, give the recommendation. By staff evaluating, we don't mean say yes or no, but just say, okay, this is how much staff time it'll take, this is how much money it'll cost. Put forth the recommendation, and you guys can then have 4 or 5 different community events through the year. And then at the end of that year, around budget time, you have certain performance metrics. You say, okay, well, this event was really well attended. You know, it came under budget or over budget. Maybe we need to reevaluate this program. And that's really all you need to do. You already do have committees and a system in place. So if it is the policy of this board and you wish to see more community events, that's set a dollar amount to it, make the commitment, and it doesn't really have to be that complicated.
So I don't think it's a matter of wanting to have more community events. I think it's a matter of if there's a project or something else that comes, that an idea comes through, if it's something the board would want to have happen. It could be a community event. Is that not right, Henry? I mean, that's the way I'm interpreting it. And so I understand what you're saying, and yes, that makes perfect sense. But I think this is a little bit more than, do we want to have a community event and let's just go that way. To the mayor's point, someone asked about bat houses. Well, is that something we want to get involved with? That would be something that wouldn't have to fall to staff. It could fall to this committee that would say, well, we've looked into it. It's this. Here's the answers for the board. This came up. We don't want to do it. We do want to do it. I think that's more than just as opposed to having, should we have a, Memorial Day party or a Memorial Day parade or whatever. So that's just the way I take it.
I think, no. I think there's a question that is still the clarity, the role clarity between the board, the administrative branch, the Board of Trustees, clarity, and exactly how that can or can't work. But it is up to the board if they want to create this special committee and then figure out how it works later. That's what I'm kind of getting from this. So the motion is on the floor. It's been seconded.
You need a roll call.
Is there any further discussion? We will probably need to look into that a little bit more. Are you looking at the code? Is that what you're
I
doing?
brought it with me in case.
Why not?
I know, just
You always have.
so I
it,
could
though,
drive
right?
off some more people from
Yeah,
the village
really.
hall before I'm done.
So creation of a committee, we'll do a roll call. Roll call, please.
Trustee Smith?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Trustee Hollander?
Aye.
Trustee Jameson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, next issue is the approval of Gaywald Hamilton rates for services for the year ending December 31, 2025. Trustee, Director Witt, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So we have a contract in front of us, not here tonight, but within the administrative area for GHA to be doing work for the Village of Riverwoods for 2025. That is still under review as we're trying to negotiate a few items. However, GHA has asked if during that time period, while the contract is under review, if their hourly rates for 2025 actually be approved so that they can bill us for those new rates. Should be noted that work that's been performed to date in 2025 has been billed by GHA under their current 2024 hourly rate schedule. So the hourly rate schedule has been attached. One thing I did on the page after their rate schedule is I did an analysis to see, based on the staff members that are typically assigned to the work for the village, and the increase in the hourly rates averages about 9.21% from 2024 to 2025. So GHA has asked for us to bring this forth in front of you, see if we can get approval. So again, that they can bill us at their 2025 hourly rate schedule while their contract is under negotiation.
Trustee Jamerson.
So you shaded in the ones that we use that are most generally assigned to us. But which ones are the ones that we get billed the most often? Is it the senior project manager 2 and senior project manager 1? Are those the ones that?
All right, so Carissa comes in at senior project manager 1. So the bulk of a lot of the work that is billed to us would be her. We also have under project manager 1 and the engineering technicians like Jim Baxa, Gene Shear are really carrying a lot of the work that's happening within the village.
Okay.
From an accounting perspective, with the utility billing, you can see that's on the far bottom right corner. So it's kind of, I would think that if you averaged even the top 5 people, you're probably going to come up with about the same percentage.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Witt, how much does Gaywald Hamilton charge or invoice the Village of Riverwoods on an annual basis? Ballpark?
I'll let Director Vasquez respond to that.
So while it varies based on the ongoing projects. Sure. For 2024 activity, the invoice total was about $811,000, although the total number of checks we cut was 614,000 based on the timing of when the invoice activity was received. But generally it's for the last few years, it's been somewhere north of that 500,000 number.
So it's a tremendous amount of money, and the rate of increase is at least 3 times CPIW. Have they provided rationale on why an average of 9.21 versus CPIW, Consumer Price Index of wages, is 2.8? It seems like a pretty huge gap. And what we typically see, think about CPIW, think about that's kind of like your typical salaried or hourly employees increase year to year. So they're essentially tripling that, which seems extreme. Have they given any logic or rationale of why 9.21 versus something more typical of CPIW?
No, they have not.
Trustee Jamerson.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Oh, I thought you.
I just
oh,
said it was a good question.
It was a good question.
It was a good
Oh, I
question.
thought you said I have a
No.
question. Sorry, sorry.
No, I don't have a
I can certainly take it back to them and ask them to provide a written rationale to the numbers they're showing.
We are, if I can just.
Oh,
comment.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
We are using them less than we have been using because of our
Yes.
our director.
Yes.
Yes. Witt in particular. And so the money, the invoices will come down, but that's still not a rationale for the raise.
There is a great deal of work behind the scenes on this. They go, Director Vasquez and Director Witt scrub their bills every time they are presented to us, before they're presented to us. We have also done a deep dive into the IGA that we have with Lake County and are leaning on that more than we have in the past. And we've leaned on GHA in the past, and now we are introducing Lake County Public Works into that equation according to the IGA. So yes, things are coming down, but right, the billing rate went up, so where are we? We're the same place. We are looking at some alternatives, but looking at alternatives and actually being able to connect with those alternatives is going to take some time. So Trustee Dickon.
Question, comment. Mayor, last time we spoke, you had mentioned that Director Witt had discovered that all the repairs for Saunders Road that were previously done by GHA could have actually been billed to Lake County. Did I hear that right?
Not to the road. There was
Okay,
a.
so
do you wanna-
it's not on Saunders Road. The issue at hand was that the IGA with the county has them essentially providing services underneath the IGA to do the repair work for any of the water main breaks. That does not include the overall management of that process. In other words, getting the notification, doing the boil orders, things like that. That is part of what what GHA is supposed to be providing to us as part of the responsible office in charge. It's called the ROINC. So it's the responsible
operator in charge.
Operator in charge. Thank you, Mayor. I don't know why that eluded my brain. So between the two of those, essentially we are covered by the flat fee that we are charged by GHA to be the ROINC for us, and for the county then bringing in their services to do the repairs, there would be no additional charges besides the flat fee of which GHA charges us on a monthly basis.
Okay, so procedurally, we're going to be doing things differently going forward as far as water main repairs go on public roads?
Well, procedurally, what had happened in the past is that GHA was just taking full charge of it, finding a contractor who was available to do the work, getting at least 2 quotes for it, and then going through that process, which in sometimes actually caused some delay. I'm not saying it was lengthy, but nonetheless, when you have to get out there and find somebody who's going to quote the work and then make a decision on who actually does the repair versus being able to call the county. And when we had the water main break on Oakhurst, they were there within the hour.
Are you anticipating a reduction in costs going forward with any changes in the process?
I'm sorry.
Are you anticipating a reduction in costs in terms of the process now that we've discovered that there was this issue?
Well, the reduction is actually what we're saving because the county's handling that under the IGA at no additional charge for those services. What we're actually doing is we're diving into the IGA, discovering what services that the county is truly providing for us underneath that, which is not costing us additional money. So here we're finding out that, lo and behold, the county as part of the IGA covers that cost of doing those repairs, which in previous years prior to my time, and even in the first year I was here, GHA was doing that. We were paying additional for these other contractors that were coming in. So had GHA been working underneath that and working with the county for us, we would have been saving money.
Okay, thank you.
Question.
Did you have I'm sorry, trustee Hollander.
GHA is well aware of the IGA, of the intergovernmental agreement. They work with that all the time with the villages with whom they work.
Okay, so to the best of my knowledge, they are aware of the IGA. It's my understanding that why we were in the situation we were in is that there was a point in time when we had a water break and the county was requested to come out. The county at that point, I believe it was cold weather, the county had 3 breaks going at the same time. They didn't have an additional crew to come out and do the immediate repair. GHA then went out and found somebody else to do the work, and that had then become the standard protocol.
Got it.
And now what we're trying to do is diving into, as we are looking at turning over relief on every invoice and all these procedures, discovering that, hey, there is an alternative to what's going on, and it certainly doesn't cost us any money to go this route.
I vaguely remember that incident, but I guess my question really is, do you think GHA was aware that they were doing work that could have been done
No.
not at the village expense, but by the county?
In that particular case, I believe that that is the case.
But going
Now,
forward.
why it moved forward doing that, I don't know. I don't have that history, but we're trying to reverse that at this point.
No, I understand that, and I think that's smart, but I guess it concerns me because we've used GHA for many years, and they work very closely with the county, and they know these agreements. I think it's a little upsetting that they may be knowingly charging us for work that they knew should have been done by the county following this incident. There's nothing we can do now, but
I don't believe Gaywald isn't a party to that that agreement.
the IGA,
The IGA. It's an intergovernmental agreement.
right? But
I don't
You don't
think
think-
they are intimately familiar.
then that
with
answers my question. All right, that was my
really don't believe
question.
they
Were
are.
they aware of that? Okay.
May I ask a question about the
Absolutely.
agenda item?
Oh, yeah, yes.
So
Trustee
what
Jamerson, please.
you're asking for, Director Witt, is you're asking for us to approve these current rates that are on this sheet, right? So they can bill for them. But what happens, I'm assuming that if you negotiate something less, they're going to give us a credit?
That has not been offered.
Well, then I'm not in favor of granting them to bill with these rates. Is that a good question?
We're kind of, yes, absolutely it is. We're kind of in a little interesting box here.
Oh, okay. I don't know the whole story.
Yeah, well, no, you do. We've got, we've got GHA that we rely on in very many ways. And we have not finalized an ongoing contract with them. And I don't believe we ever really had an ongoing contract with them. It was always professional services and so forth. And so we're trying to give some form and function to it. And, in the meantime, we're kind of limping along before we get it all settled, trying to figure out exactly what we've got in terms of the IGA, what they're actually doing, how we can go about, we're again scrubbing their bills, and I think we've gotten a $20,000 credit from them so far in going back and saying this was too high, this was not. It's what do we do if we don't? And they say, okay, goodbye. Now, village engineer, they are so intertwined with us. So that's
Okay.
yeah.
So
If you
Okay,
don't approve it, but
so-
we could go back, as was suggested earlier, we could go back and say, we need justification for these rates. The board was not, did not want to move forward without justification for how you got your, how you went up 9%. I think that's a fair thing to ask them.
I think that would be prudent.
And Yeah.
Because then it sounds like what we're doing is what I heard you say was that basically this is kind of an interim rate schedule until you work out a contract with them?
No, as
Okay,
I
go
understand it, their position is that this is their 2025 rate for hourly projects.
Okay.
Anything else, if we do design work, say if we have them do the design work for lift station repair,
They'll bid on that.
we're going to be looking at getting bids on that instead of just turning it over and saying, okay, here we are. We would be looking at bidding them perhaps against the county versus somebody else and taking a look at, analyzing those bids to determine who's really best fit for this.
Okay.
No different than what we did with regard to the Saunders Road Phase 3. Same concept.
Okay. I will say that in the past, when Pat Glenn was here and the rate schedule came, he always told us that they were giving us a discount. Now, they may be taking this opportunity to get us back up to where everybody else is charging. So it would be good to get some kind of justification. So if it can wait 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I won't be here, but if it can wait 2 weeks, that's fine. I think that'd be a good question to ask.
Trustee Dickon.
Yeah, I'm wondering if instead of going back to them and asking for justification, we could just approve an increase of 4.3% and go back to them with a negotiation proposal and just cross this item off of future agendas. I don't know if that's possible, Council.
Yeah,
I don't know what do you think?
If I
Director
might,
Ritz?
I would just, it's an average. Yeah.
If I might, I would suggest we just hold off on this. 2 weeks is not going to make or break this deal.
Yeah, my recommendation would actually be, instead of what Trustee Dickon recommended, which might be where we end up anyways, I would just say no and come back to us with a better offer. Yeah, but I'm right. I asked if there was justification, but any good consultant can make a justification out of any set of numbers or words. One of my favorite things to say is numbers lie and liars use numbers. So my point would be is I would suggest that we just go back and say no. And then see what they want to come back with, or what their response to that is.
The village is very intertwined with GHA. I would be very careful and just going back with a no. And if they're busy and they have a lot of work, they may just accept that. We're talking about, I do not think the board ought to be negotiating in this way. That we have to leave that to our staff.
Sure, yep.
But I think that the sense of the board is clearly heard, but I don't think we ought to be negotiating, and I do not agree with just saying no, because I don't want to hear what they may say
Is this a
after
project
that.
evaluation?
And really,
Trustee Smith?
and just Trustee Hollander, very well said. And when I was saying no, it's just no to the increase, not no to services, is my intent.
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
I suggest we have a conversation, ask them to justify their rates, and is there some kind of discount available to a municipality? And see what we come back with in 2 weeks.
I will take that to them and report back in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, 2 weeks. Okay. We're finished with new business, for the love of God. Old business, yes, no, I've got page 2 here. Old business, approval of a contract for HVAC maintenance services with Emmy Bach in the amount not to exceed $7,700. Director Witt, please.
Oh, I was just going to say so.
Okay, so as I figured might have happened at the last time I brought this to the board, unfortunately, when I asked for this contract to get extended. I originally was looking for something that would end in 2026. Clerk Moore has spoken with M.E. Bach, and their indication is that their intent was this number was valid through the end of 2025. So bringing it back in front of the board for an approval for that. Evidently, the increase, as they explained it to us, is last year was the first time that they really did this work. And based on the amount of work that it took, considering the condition of the mechanical systems in both of the buildings at the police department and Village Hall, they claim they totally underestimated the amount of time that they would be spending here. And this proposal is more reflective of the time that they feel is actually involved to give us the service that we're looking for.
Do I have a motion for approval, please?
Motion for approval.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call, please.
Trustee Dickon?
Aye.
Trustee Eastman?
Aye.
Trustee Hollander?
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson?
Aye.
Trustee Smith?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to committee reports. Trustee Clayton isn't with us this evening for Finance Communications. Trustee Dickon, please.
Yes. So I met with our Chief of Technology yesterday, who happens to be our Chief of Police, and I also met with Dana, who works for the Police Department, also helps out at the Village Hall, and we went over a number of transitioning items as my term is coming to the end. We've gone over website maintenance, traffic monitoring, Google Analytics, the fee scheduling and how that's been maintained, and some issues that have come up over the years with the maintenance permit applications, both online and paper forms, how to properly set up print files. I've set up a number of templates that I think the village could use going forward that will result in cost savings for all the mailings. We've done a pilot program with the police department last year when we mailed out postcards for alarm registrations, and that resulted not in only a couple $100s of cost savings, but also in reductions of staff time, in terms of printing printing these notices, stuffing envelopes. There's a more efficient way of doing things that will reduce manual labor of the staff, as well as will overall cost less for the village. So I hope those things will remain sustainable.
Are there any questions for our trustee? Thank you. Next, Woodlands Ecology Legal. Trustee Eastman, please.
Nothing to report.
Trustee Hollander, Land Use and Roads.
No report.
Building, Trustee Jamerson.
Always ready. It's not in your packet because it just came out today, because it's right after the end of the month. But the building permits for the month of March, we had $843,000 worth of construction value, mainly two residential remodels made up most of that. We are about 56% of our construction value from 2025 to 2024, and also about the same percentage in permits that have been taken out. That does not mean our building department is not busy. They are extremely busy, and continue to work at a feverish pace, and I can't thank them enough for all that they do.
Are there any questions for our building trustee? Okay, moving on. Community Services. Trustee Smith, please.
No report.
Sustainability and Climate Action. Chairman Brightcoff.
We are virtually done with the, is this on?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Okay. The task force is virtually done with the drafting of the plan, sustainability and climate action plan. We're tweaking it now, cleaning up some of the charts, making sure it's grammatically correct and all those kind of things you do with a plan, but it's virtually done. So what we want to do is present it to the new board on May the 6th. We plan to get the packets to the trustees on Earth Day, which is April 22nd, and we will get it to the staff before then so that if there's anything they'd like to contribute, we can address that before we get the packet to the trustees.
Any questions for our chair? Thank you. Oh, Did I see a hand? No. Okay. Next, strategic land use. Trustee Hollander, please.
We'll have a final report at the next board meeting on the 15th. What you'll be seeing is going to be a matrix, which will try to show what the residents from the survey want, what the land will allow, and whether or not this is feasible for us to even do as a village. So that final report will be at the next board meeting.
Are there any questions for our trustee? Okay, moving forward, board comments. Is there anything left? Okay, seeing none, seeing no issues, nobody wants to bring up discussion for next time. No reason to go into executive session. The date and the time for our next meeting is the regular Tuesday, April 15th, tax day. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Come on.
There's one over here.
Oh,